buried alive by her own brothers. A Lakota chief dug her out and gave her a people to call her own. The first thing I pulled from the ground was her hand. Not a body, not a shape in the dirt, a hand. Fingers spread against the soil the way a drowning person spreads them against a current they cannot fight. I was riding the canyon cut at first light, the same cut I had ridden for 30 years, and I almost missed it. My horse Chantechilla Hartavok, a name he earned, not I gave, he stopped. Planted all 4 feet and stopped. He was not a horse that stopped for shadows. I got down. The ground along the dry creek bank had been turned. Someone had worked it. Not water, not a root fall, hands. The kind of turning a man does when he means it to stay turned, when he means what he has buried to stay buried. The mound was fresh. I could smell the turned earth, that cold, wet smell under the surface crust, and there was the hand. Just the hand at the far edge, like it had pushed through on its own or been pushed through by the body's last argument with being dead. I knelt and I listened. There was no sound from the ground, none. I laid my palm on the mound, felt nothing. Then I put my ear to it, the way you listen to a wall for what is happening on the other side, and I heard, very faint, the muffled work of a chest trying to pull air through packed earth. Still alive. I dug with my hands. I did not go for my pack, did not go for the hatchet I carry, did not stop to think about whose land this was or who had done this thing. I dug. The ground was soft enough. Whoever had done this had been in a hurry, had not tamped it hard, and in the time it takes a man to unsaddle a horse, I had her face clear. She was pale as ash. Her mouth was sealed with dirt. Her eyes were closed. I turned her head to the side, scraped the mud from her lips with my thumb, tilted her head back the way my grandfather taught me for a man pulled from a river, and I pressed once on her chest, and she coughed. One ragged, wrenching cough that sounded like something tearing loose inside. Then she breathed. Just breathed. I kept digging until she was free. She was white, a settler woman, maybe 35, though it was hard to say. Thin in the way that means hungry for longer than a week. Her dress had been a good dress once, dark blue wool, but it was filthy and her hands were raw, the nails broken back to the skin from clawing. She had fought for every minute she had. I could see that in her hands. A woman who fights like that, even in the dark, in the ground, with no sound coming back, that is a woman worth the trouble of getting out. I wrapped her in my blanket, got water from the pack, dribbled it on her lips and waited. She did not wake that hour. I did not expect her to. I built no fire, the smoke would announce us to whoever had done this, and I sat with my rifle across my knees and watched the canyon mouth while Chantechilla grazed. The sun came full up over the eastern rim, turned the rock walls amber, and I thought about what kind of men bury a living woman. I had seen a great many kinds of men in my years. Army men, trader men, outlaw men, men who were nothing but hunger wearing boots. I had fought some of them, and I had spoken with some of them, and I had outlasted most of them. But a man who puts a living woman in the ground, that is a particular kind of rot. The kind that does not come from circumstance. It comes from the inside. When she woke screaming and fighting. I held her arms, not tight, just steady. And I said in plain English, I have spoken English since I was 12 years old, since the mission school they made me attend, and it has been a useful thing. I said, you are above ground. You are safe. No one is here but me. She stopped, looked at me. Her eyes were dark brown, very clear, the whites gone pink from the dirt and the cold. She looked at me the way a person looks at something they cannot immediately sort, not fear, not trust, just this pure, stripped-down accounting, taking stock. Then she said, they buried me. I said, I know. She said, my brothers. I didn't answer that. There was nothing to answer. The fact of it was sitting right there between us, big as the canyon wall, her own brothers. She had the scratch marks on her hands, and she had the turned earth, and she had the fact that she was still breathing, and none of it needed my comment. I gave her water. I gave her dried meat from my pack, thin strips of elk I had made at camp 4 days before. She ate carefully at first, then fast, then carefully again. A woman who knows what her stomach can hold after being without. She ate half of what I offered and stopped herself and handed the rest back. I said, "Keep it." She held it in her lap like it was something valuable. Her name was Margaret Ord. She told me in pieces over the better part of that morning as I got her onto Chantechilla and walked us north toward my people's camp. She talked partly to herself, I think, or to the ground she had come out of. Sorting it out loud. Her father had died in the spring. There was land, a section of good bottom land, a house, cattle, a full water right, and there were 3 brothers. She was the only daughter. She had assumed her father's working of the land for 11 years, from the time her mother died and her father's hands started to fail. The brothers had come after the funeral like something had been unlocked. There was a paper, they said, a document of some kind. She had never seen it, and she did not believe it, and she had refused to leave. She had said she would go to the Territorial Land Office. She had said she would speak to the judge who was due to ride circuit in the fall. She never made it to fall. One night in late summer they came for her, all 3. One of them, the oldest, Theodore, had said to her, "It is easier this way," as if what he was doing was a mercy he was performing. I have thought about Theodore Ord many times since that morning. A man who says it is easier this way while he is doing a thing like that, he is not a man who has lost his way. He is a man who never had one. There is a difference. A man who loses his way can find it again if someone holds a light. A man who never had one will walk off any edge you put in front of him and call it sense. Margaret Ord had not screamed when they put her in the ground because she had known it would do no good. She had used her air carefully. She had not panicked. She had kept her hand moving, slow and steady, working it toward the surface over what must have been hours, just to mark where she was, just so that if anyone came, though she had not believed anyone would come, they would have something to find. That hand, those broken fingernails pushing up through the soil. 30 years of riding that canyon and I had never stopped there, but Chantechilla stopped. I have never understood horses the way some men do. My father did. He could read a horse the way another man reads weather. I did not inherit that exactly, but I have trusted that horse for 11 years, and he has not once been wrong about a thing that mattered. I said to Margaret Ord as we walked north, "My people's camp is half a day. You will be safe there." She said, "Safe with the Lakota." She did not say it as a challenge. She said it the way a person says something they are trying to make real by speaking it aloud, testing the shape of it. I said, "Safer than where I found you." She made a sound that was almost a laugh. The first one, short and dry like a match striking. She said, "That is not difficult. I am called Wombly Sapa, Black Eagle. It is not a name I gave myself, and if I were to pick one, I might have chosen something quieter, but names are not ours to pick. They come from what you have done, and this one came from a fight near the Powder River in my 22nd year. A story I am not going to tell right now, except to say that after it the older men called me that, and it held. I have led my band for 16 years. We are not a large band. We were larger once before the fever of 1868 and the soldiers of 1874. We are still here, which is not a small thing. In 1883, the year I am talking about, we were camped in a valley known to us for a long time, a valley the whites had not yet decided they needed. 3 winters we had used it. The water was good, the wood was close, the grass held our horses through the hard months. I did not know how much longer we would have it. I had learned not to count on such things. But that year we had it, and on the morning I carried Margaret Ord into camp over the back of Chantechilla. It was as good a place as I had to offer. The women of the camp came out immediately, the way women do when something unexpected arrives. My sister Thankan, she is 4 years older than I am and has never once let me forget it, took one look at Margaret Ord and began giving orders. She did not ask me what had happened or whether this was a good idea. She saw what she needed to see, which was a woman in bad shape who needed tending, and she acted on it. I have always respected that about Thang Khan. She decides the necessary thing and then she does it. The men of the camp watched. They did not interfere, but they watched. There was Hehaka Ska, White Elk, my war chief, who had ridden with me since we were both young men and who trusted my judgment, but was not shy about questioning it when he thought I was wrong. He came to stand beside me as I unsaddled Chantech Hilla. He said, without looking at me, "Where did you find her?" I told him the mound, the hand, the brothers. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "The brothers will come looking." I said, "Let them." He looked at me then. He has a face that does not change much. Even in the old fights it barely changed, but there was something in it that morning. Not disapproval, more like a man checking whether the floor will hold before he puts his weight on it. Then he nodded once and went back to what he had been doing. That was enough. Margaret Ord was in my sister's lodge for 4 days. I did not go in. That is not my place. A woman healing is under the authority of the women, and I have never had reason to override that. Thang Khan gave me reports each evening in the way she gives me everything, directly, without softening. Day 1 she sleeps. She has a fever. Her lungs are not good. Day 2 fever is down, she ate. Her hands are bad, the broken nails need tending, 2 fingers may be cracked. She does not weep, she does not speak much. She watches. Day 3 she is sitting up, she asked about you. I told her your name and she said it back twice, careful, she is learning. Day 4 she wants to come out. Thang Khan said it with that flat certainty that meant she had already decided to allow it, and was informing me, not asking. I said, "Is she ready?" Thang Khan said, "She was ready on day 2. I kept her for my purposes." I did not ask what her purposes were. With my sister, that is rarely a question with a useful answer. Margaret Ord came out of that lodge on the morning of the 5th day, and she stood in the light for a while, just stood there, which I understood. She had clean clothes, Thang Khan's spare dress, which fit her poorly, but it was clean, and her hair had been combed and braided back. Her hands were wrapped in strips of soft hide. She stood in the light and she looked at the valley, the horses in the meadow, the children running near the water, the smoke from the cooking fires going straight up in the still morning air. She looked at me when I walked toward her. I said, "How are you?" She said, "I am standing. That is considerably more than I expected 4 days ago." I said, "Thang Khan kept you longer than necessary." She said, "Your sister told me things I needed to know." I did not ask what things. We walked that morning. Not far, she was not up to far yet, but along the creek, south, the direction of the canyon where I had found her. She did not seem to mean anything by choosing that direction. She walked like a woman who needs movement, who has been still too long and feels it as a pressure. She talked about her father, Titus Ord, she said, a man from Ohio who had come west in 1851 with $30 and a particular stubbornness. He had built the place with his own hands, the house, the corrals, the irrigation ditch that kept the bottom field green in July. He had not been a soft man, she said. He had not given affection the way some fathers did. But he had been fair, and he had known what she was worth as a worker, as a reader of weather and grass and cattle, as the one who kept the place running while the boys went off and came back and went off again. She said he left me nothing in his will, not a word. It was as if I had not been there. I waited. She said, "I think he assumed I would be cared for, by the boys, by the land that would obviously be half mine because who else had worked it. He assumed wrong things about Theodore." She stopped walking. She said, "I am not stupid. I know that. I am not asking you to think I am stupid." I said, "I don't think that." She turned and looked at me. The creek moved behind her. There was a hawk working the updraft above the canyon rim, holding steady. She said, "Then what do you think?" I said, "I think your father made the mistake a great many men make. He assumed the people around him were more like him than they were. It cost him nothing to make that mistake. It cost you everything." She held my gaze for a long moment. Then she looked away, back at the creek. She said, "Your sister told me you have been chief here for 16 years. I said, "Yes." She said, "She told me what it costs, what you have given to keep these people together. She told me about the soldiers in '74 and the treaty that was not kept, and the year the buffalo were thin. She told me what kind of man it takes to keep holding a thing together when every force in the world is trying to take it apart." I did not say anything. When Thang Khan decides to tell a person something, she tells them everything. Margaret Ord said quietly, "She said you found me because you were looking. Not for me, just looking, always looking." I said, "That is a habit from a long time ago." She said, "How long?" I thought about it. I said, "Since I was about 19. A raid took 3 of our people that year. I was not looking then. I was young and certain, and I believed I knew what needed watching. After that I learned to look at the things I was sure did not need watching." She nodded slowly. She understood that. I could see it. I said after a moment, "You can stay. Through the winter at least. You will need to be useful. That is not a condition. It is just the truth of how we live here. But Thang Khan tells me, you are not a woman who has trouble being useful." She made that short dry sound again, almost a laugh. She said, "Your sister is very thorough." I said, "She is." Then she said, "And when the brothers come?" I had been waiting for that question. I said, "They will come. Men like Theodore Ord do not stop because a thing is done. They come back to make sure it is done." She said, "And when they do?" I said, "This is our camp, our valley, our canyon. I will speak to them, and what I say to them will be plain enough that even Theodore Ord will understand it." She looked at me. That same clear accounting look she had given me the morning I dug her out, taking stock. She said, "You are not afraid of them." I said, "I have been afraid of things in my life. Theodore Ord does not qualify." She was quiet. The hawk had dropped out of the updraft and vanished. Chantechilla was visible up the creek bank, grazing with 2 of the other horses. The morning was warm and very still. She said, "I do not know how to thank you." I said, "You are standing above ground. That is enough." The brothers came in October. 3 of them as I expected. Theodore in front, a big man going soft at the belly, with a good coat and the kind of face that has spent a lifetime being told yes. His brothers behind him, younger, harder, meaner looking but following, which told me what I needed to know about who held the authority between them. They had 2 men with them, hired hands or hired something, carrying rifles in a way that was meant to look casual and did not. They rode into the camp openly. I will give Theodore Ord that much. He was not a coward in the physical sense. He came in the way men come in when they believe they have the weight of the world behind them, law or custom, or simply the assumption that they will be allowed to proceed. I was standing in front of my lodge when they arrived. Heihaka Ska was to my right, 10 yards back, and 2 of our younger men were further behind him. None of us had our rifles in hand. I do not negotiate from behind a rifle if I can help it. I have found it tends to shorten conversations that need to be long. Theodore Ord looked around the camp, looked at me, said, "We are looking for a woman, white woman, name of Margaret Ord. She is our sister." I said, "I know who you are looking for." He said, "Then you know she is ours too." I said, "She is not yours." He stopped. His horse shifted under him. He had not expected to be interrupted, and he had certainly not expected the word no to arrive that fast and that flat. He said, "She is our family, whatever she told you." I said, "She told me nothing that I did not already know. I found her in the ground, Mr. Ord. I dug her out with my hands. She is alive because I found her before she was not." He did not answer immediately. His jaw tightened in that way a man's jaw tightens when he is recalculating. He said, "She has property disputes with us, legal matters. It would be better handled in." I said, "There are no legal matters here. There is a woman who lives in my camp and is under my protection." That is the only fact that concerns you today." He looked at the men behind me, looked at the valley, looked at the distance, measuring it the way men measure things when they are thinking about whether what they are planning is possible. I said, "I have been chief in this valley for 16 years. My father led here for 22 years before me. The men with me have ridden and fought and buried their brothers beside me for longer than you have owned that coat. If you have a thought in your head that involves those rifles, I suggest you take it out and leave it here when you go." He held my gaze. I held his. He was the first to look away. He said, and I could hear in his voice that something had gone out of him, some certainty he had ridden in with, "This isn't finished." I said, "For your sake, Mr. Ord, it should be." They left. Ska came up to stand beside me as they rode out of the valley. He watched them until the canyon wall took them. He said, "Theodore." I said, "Yes." He said, "He will think about it." I said, "He will." He said, "And then?" I said, "And then he will decide it is not worth it. Men like Theodore think about their skins very carefully when the law is not behind them. Out here, the law is 3 days' ride." Ska said, "And if he decides it is worth it?" I said, "Then we will deal with that." He nodded. Then he said, without any particular change of tone, "She is good here. The women like her. The children have started following her around. She fixed the hitch on the drying rack that has been broken since spring. She does not ask for things she cannot earn." I said, "I know." He said, "Thankan is teaching her the language." I said, "I know that too." He gave me a look I know well, a look that is not quite a smile but contains one. He said nothing more and walked back to the fire. Thankan had been teaching her for weeks. Margaret Ord turned out to have the particular stubbornness for language, not just the sounds but the sense of it, the way it holds the world differently than English holds it. She would repeat a word until she had it right, then use it immediately, then repeat it again the next day to make sure it had stuck. She made mistakes, and when she made them she did not seem embarrassed. She corrected the mistake and moved on. Thankan told me one evening, "She learns the way a person learns who is not planning to leave." I did not answer that directly. I said, "She is welcome as long as she wants to stay." Thankan looked at me with that expression only older sisters have, the one that sees more than you meant to show. She said, "That is not what I said." I let it go. My sister has always had a way of landing on the exact truth and then holding it up in front of you like a lantern, and there is no useful response to that except silence. Winter came in hard that year, the first snow in late September, which was not usual, and by November the passes were closed and the valley was entirely ours. There is something about a hard winter in a good camp that I have always found settling. The world gets smaller. The work is clear. You know what you have and you know what it costs to keep it, and there is no pretending otherwise. Margaret Ord worked. She was not a woman who needed to be told what to do. She saw what needed doing and she did it. The wood, the hides, the cooking. She had a way with the horses, gentle and direct at once, and Chantich, who does not warm to people easily, let her groom him inside of a week. She was up before most of the camp and she was among the last to sleep. One evening in December I came back late from tracking an injured elk I had been following north for 2 days. I had lost it finally, in new snow that covered the trail clean, and the camp was dark except for the fire in front of my lodge. Margaret Ord was sitting there. She had a small fire, just a warming fire, and she had a hide she was working on, scraping it slowly. She looked up when I came in. She said, "Sit down." I unsaddled the horse and sat. She handed me a bowl that had been sitting near the fire. Elk broth, still warm. I ate. She went back to the hide. Neither of us spoke for a while, and the silence was not uncomfortable, the kind of silence that has been broken enough times that it knows how to settle. She said without looking up, "You didn't find it?" I said no. She said, "Tomorrow." I said the snow was too new. No. She said there will be another one. I said yes. She scraped the hide. The fire shifted. Somewhere across the camp a horse moved, and the jingle of it carried in the cold air. She said, "Do you know what I think about sometimes in the night?" I waited. She said, "Not the ground. I thought that would be the thing I'd think about, but it isn't. I think about my father's face when he was satisfied with the work, when we had brought the herd in or the hay was good or the ditch held through a flood. He had this face, just a plain face, not a smile exactly, just settled, like everything was accounted for." She paused. She said, "I have not missed my brothers. Not once. I did not know it was possible to feel nothing for people you grew up with, but it turns out to be possible. But that face of his, I miss that." I looked at the fire. I said, "My father used to stand at the edge of camp in the evenings and just look at it. The fires, the horses, the lodges." He did not say anything. He just stood there. She said, "Yes, like that." We sat for a while longer. The cold was very still, the kind of cold that feels solid. She said, "I am going to stay." I did not say anything. She said, "I am not asking permission. I am telling you. I want you to know it is a decision, not a drifting. I have been thinking about it since October, since your sister started teaching me, since I understood what this place actually is. I want to stay here. I want to be part of this." I said, "You already are." She looked at me then, direct, the way she had looked at me the morning I dug her out, that clear accounting look, except this time there was something in it that had not been there that morning, not relief, not gratitude, something quieter and more certain. She said, "I want you to know I see what you carry here, what it takes, what you have given for these people and what you give every day. I am not blind to it. I have never met a man I respected the way I respect you. It is a hard thing to receive, respect when it comes plainly and without motive. I have had men say they respected me because they feared me, and I have had younger men say it because they wanted something. This was not that. This was a woman who had been in the ground and come out and spent 3 months watching and working and learning and was now saying, 'I see you, not your position, not your title, not the weight that comes with them. You.'" I said after a moment, "I am glad you stayed." She moved, set the hide down, shifted on her blanket, and she reached across and took my hand. Not held it exactly, just covered it with hers briefly, the way a person touches something they want to be certain is still there. My hand in the firelight and hers over it, the wrapped fingers from the broken nails she had used to push through the earth toward whatever small chance there might be. She said, "Thank you for looking." I said, Chantechilla stopped. She said, "I know, your sister told me. She said the horse has never been wrong." I said, "He has not." She took her hand back, looked at the fire. Then she looked out at the valley, at the dark and the snow and the stars over the canyon rim. She said, "It is a good place." I said, "Yes." She said, "Your father was right to hold it." I said, "My father would have said it is not a thing you hold. It is a thing you tend." She thought about that, nodded slowly. The fire burned low. Across the camp there was no sound. The valley was entirely still, the snow absorbing everything, and above us the sky was enormous and cold and full of light. I banked the fire. She went to thank Khan's lodge for the night, as she had every night since October. I went to mine. I lay for a while in the dark, not sleeping, thinking about the elk I had not found and the snow that had been too new and the fire's warmth still in my face. And thinking about a hand, pushing up through turned earth in the gray light of an early morning, and a horse standing foursquare on a canyon floor, refusing to move until someone paid attention. There are things in a man's life that he carries differently than others. They do not weigh more. They are just always there, present, like a hand on the shoulder. The morning I dug Margaret Ord from the ground is one of mine, not because of what it was exactly, because of what it became. She stayed through that winter and through the spring. She stayed through the year. Theodore Ord made one more attempt, riding to the territorial agent's office in the spring, filing some complaint about a missing person or some such, and the agent sent a man out, and that man rode into the valley and spoke with Margaret Ord for 2 hours, and Margaret Ord told him what she chose to tell him, and the man rode back out, and we never heard from Theodore Ord again. I do not know what she said. I never asked. It was her story to tell. By the second winter, she was speaking the language well enough to argue, which Thang Khan announced with a satisfaction that suggested she had been waiting for it. By the third year, she was simply part of us. There is a word for that in English, belonging, but it is a thin word for what I mean. Belonging suggests a thing that happens to you. What I mean is a thing you build, every day, with your hands. The wood carried and the water hauled and the language learned and the horses tended, and the quiet seasons passed in a cold and beautiful valley with people who have decided to keep each other. She is beside me as I tell this. We are sitting outside, the evening of a September that is not unlike the September I found her. The valley is going gold. The aspens up on the east ridge are turning. Chantachilla is in the meadow, old now, moving carefully but still out there. She is working on something, a letter, I think, to a woman she knows in the East, a cousin she has been writing to for a year. She writes carefully, choosing the words. That same deliberateness she brings to the language, to the work, to everything she decides to do. She looks up from the letter and looks at the valley. Then she looks at me. She says, "It is a good evening." I say, "Yes." She goes back to the letter. Thang Khan comes out of the lodge behind us with 2 bowls and sets them down without a word and goes back inside. The smoke from the fire goes straight up in the still air, just as it did the morning Margaret Ord stood in the light for the first time and looked at what her life had become. My father used to stand at the edge of camp in the evenings and look at it, just look. I understand that now in a way I did not when I was young. You are not surveying it. You are not measuring it. You are just letting it be real. The fires, the horses, the lodges, the people you have kept, the fragile and difficult and particular thing you have tended into being. The valley goes amber, then rose, then the cool gray of an early dark. I sit with a good woman beside me and the work of 30 years around me and my dignity whole, and the stars come out over the canyon rim, one at a time, the way they always do.